Welcome back to another episode of Boss Economics World, where we chop through the tangled web of economic absurdities and governmental blunders with a machete of truth. Today, we're diving deep into the most recent economic uproar, President Trump's threats to impose a whopping 25% tariff on Mexico and Canada, with a side helping of global volatility and market tremors. By now, you know the drill. When governments try to act smart, Boss Economics is here to dissect it with brutal honesty. Let's start by taking stock of the headline. The US dollar rebounded after its sharpest fall in 14 months. The dollar's value rose as much as 0.7% in Asia after falling in New York. Now, if you're sitting there wondering why this matters, let me break it down. When President Trump started beating the tariff war drum, many rushed into buying up dollars, the ultimate reserve currency. Not because of some faith in the US government's policy or strategy, but because when uncertainty hits the market, people cling to whatever feels safe. This is precisely what happened in the $7.5 trillion a day foreign exchange market. The mere threat of tariffs sent traders scrambling to hold dollars, pushing its price upward like a roller coaster cresting a steep incline. But, folks, let's not forget, this roller coaster is no amusement park ride. This is just one more chapter in a global economy held hostage by erratic policy moves. Let's move from the symptom to the disease, tariffs. President Trump isn't shying away from disruption, he's openly toying with the economic well-being of millions. The market, already anxious about tariffs on Mexico and Canada, took the hint that larger levies on China could be just around the corner. And that's where the real problems start, ladies and gentlemen. Ricardo Cattrall from National Australia Bank put it straight: when you start with minor players, Mexico and Canada, the big question is when do the big guns, like China, get hit next? Tariffs are trade-warping measures, and in a globalized world, putting obstacles like these into play is like tossing a wrench into a delicate machine. Take a look back at the US-China trade war under Trump in 2018, tariffs led to massive supply chain disruptions, price hikes for American consumers, and retaliation from affected nations. The policy-induced uncertainty hammered the US manufacturing sector, which contracted sharply by mid-2019, the first such contraction since the Great Recession. In 2019, US companies paid out nearly $46 billion in tariffs. And guess what? American consumers and businesses footed the bill. So when we look at these new tariffs being proposed, is Trump really winning the trade wars, or is he simply continuing the tradition of punching holes in the US and global economy? Tariffs on Mexico and Canada is not just about penalizing our closest neighbors. What's at stake here is the intricate web of supply chains connecting North America's industries, especially from the auto and agriculture industries to manufacturing. Around 16% of all US trade happens between the US and Mexico alone. Mexico was the third-largest goods trading partner of the U.S. in 2022, with reinforced ties thanks to the USMCA trade deal, United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, signed to replace NAFTA. Furthermore, Canadian companies exported $449 billion to the U.S. in 2022, again highlighting the essential interdependency. Unleashing tariffs can threaten industries dependent on cross-border manufacturing processes that took decades to establish. Mexican and Canadian exports alone are critical to both input-heavy industries like automobiles or electronics and value-added agriculture. Tariffing this trade could freeze up these sectors, making supplies more expensive and, in turn, driving prices higher for the average working-class American, not to mention the ripple effects north and south of the border. This brings us to the ultimate point: Trump's protectionist stances might garner short-term applause from his base. However, if history repeats itself, and it tends to, the long-term costs will include hikes in consumer prices, tremors in U.S. industries, and global market contractions. Now, imagine tariffs on China, again. The Trump administration previously threatened duties on, frankly, everything China exports to the U.S., and we know that China's supply chain is far larger and far more critical than anything the North American bloc could ever muster alone. When measures like these are discussed, it casts a pall of uncertainty over the global economy. Take a step back, folks, and remember how tariffs destabilized the U.S. relationship with China during the Trump years. Following tariff escalations, China retaliated, devalued its yuan, and diversified its trade partners. China's GDP suffered, but the global impact was seismic. Industries in Europe, Africa, and Latin America felt the hurt as global growth projections plunged, and stock market volatility soared. The yuan dipped 0.3% on the news of more potential tariffs, reflecting China's renewed vulnerability. Still, let's not forget, for China, tariff wars only pushed their long-term strategy to reduce reliance on U.S. trade and pivot more towards Asia, Europe, and expanding in Africa. In contrast, the U.S. strategy often seems reactive, short-term, and protectionist, none of which bodes well for the economy. I'm calling it here. Tariff wars are a slow-burn disaster. For any protectionism fans lurking out there, let me clarify, like all wars, no one emerges as the victor in tariff confrontations. Just look at US-China Phase 1 trade deals which, ultimately, didn't resolve much. Both sides effused optimism over agricultural procurement deals, but long-term issues on technology transfer, intellectual property, and industrial policy remain unresolved to this day. Sure, the US Treasury saw increased income from tariffs. It collected $88 billion from various tariffs in 2021, but that figure pales in comparison to what was spent by companies, who ultimately passed the bill to consumers. Shout out to Wharton School's research, which found that 92.4% of tariff costs were absorbed by American businesses and consumers. U.S. manufacturing also pays higher prices for its input materials, leading to higher unemployment in the sector and worsened profit margins. Has anything been more self-defeating than this policy of punitive import taxes? The effects don't stop here. Emerging markets took the hit in 2018 to 2020 and will continue facing the knock-on effects of the new tariff measures. When rich countries decide to play roulette with trade tariffs, middle-income nations, like Mexico, Southeast Asia, and smaller Latin American countries, feel the wave hardest. They produce all the goods and materials fueling global supply chains, meaning when trade gets disrupted, they see reduced orders, slower growth, and foreign exchange catastrophes. The Mexican peso's 1% drop immediately reflects this vulnerability. This is not simply a currency fluctuation, it's a warning sign. A drop in confidence in emerging market currencies reflects broad pessimism about their economic stability. When one country crumbles under trade war pressure, there's a wave of collateral damage. Countries like Brazil, South Africa, and India all have dollar-denominated debts, so as the US dollar surges amid global uncertainty, this debt load becomes unpayable, putting additional pressure on their economies. World trade slows down, foreign investment retreats, and that means room for growth collapses in these already fragile economies. All because one leader decided stepping on his allies and competitors alike was good domestic politics. Remember the mess we were in back around 2023? Soaring inflation that the Federal Reserve struggled to tame, with prices surging across essentials like fuel, food, housing, you name it. Tariffs, in this environment? They are just throwing extra fuel onto an already burning fire. Once you tax imports, those costs filter down across industries and prices eventually rise for the consumer. You want higher inflation? Here you go. Increased tariffs on key goods, most importantly oil and gas imports, which passed unscathed through previous rounds, directly clog global supply chains. Less supply, higher prices, and yet more inflation. If we learned one thing, it should be that inflation is the most regressive tax ever. The wealthy weather the storm, cash savings, diversified investments, and gold bars hidden in their basements. But ordinary people? They lose everything, from their savings to their ability to buy homes or car loans, faster than it takes for tariffs to further intensify inflation. Bottom line, folks. These tariffs aren't just a bad idea, they're a powder keg. One misstep, and tariffs on Mexico, Canada, China, or any other player will set off a domino effect, compounding into lost trade, higher prices, global uncertainty, and losses for everyone involved. The US and global economy are already reeling from previous disruptions like COVID-19 and now face supply chain interruptions, inflation, and massive debt loads on businesses and consumers alike. Starting a trade war in 2025 isn't just poor timing, it's irresponsible economic suicide. So hold tight, stay savvy, and, I'll say it again, don't trust politicians who think their soundbite solutions will magically fix our trading problems. Because in the real world, tariffs, they only make things worse. Catch you on the next episode of Boss Economics World, where we'll continue exposing these economic shenanigans for what they are. Keep questioning, keep skeptical, and as always, keep your wallet safe from reckless policies.